At all, there are two types of bricks we can easily identify. We have the reddish ones and then the yellowish ones. The reddish are Portuguese, yellowish are Dutch. So then wherever you see red bricks, we're talking about the Portuguese construction. Where you see yellow, you're talking about the Dutch construction. Certain places, we have the yellow and the red at the same place. This would be recent development. To the Portuguese, they had two reasons why they built this. One, to trade, and then two, give out rooms for the missionaries who were to come in to spread Christianity. And when they came initially, they were Catholics. Before the 16th centuries, the rooms on the ground floor were being used as storerooms or warehouses as planned. But then from the 16th centuries, it shifted from gold and others to human trade. And when it got started, the same storerooms we had were then converted to holding places where the Africans were kept. At the peak of the trade, the council was talking of a minimum of about 1,000 at a time. 600 men occupying this section, 400 women on the other side. I try to tell people that the Portuguese in here in the castle did not just get up one day and said to themselves they were going into slave trading. So at least something brought about it. And before you go into that, we must also understand that slavery in itself, one way or the other, had been with all the races in the time past. And for that reason, the Africans in themselves had an idea before the foreigners came. But then how it was structured in our culture was not the same as they introduced later on. In fact, over here, a person that will be seen as a slave long before the foreigners came, to a greater extent, ought to be seen as a servant, because in most cases that person had rights. He could marry, raise free kids, acquire properties, pay the price on his head, he'll be a free person. It was very difficult in most cases identifying a slave from a free man, because almost same way he was sheltered, clothed and fed. One thing that happened to the system that was even unique was the fact that the so-called slave could shift from that status to a royal status. How would that happen? When the man proved to have managerial ability or military skill, he could become the caretaker of the master's household. Descendants of such became royals. Women got married into the system. They ceased to be servants or slaves. From then, had royal descendants. Some managed to shift from one community. They began a community for themselves. And by that shift, they all became royals. And Ghana here and now, we have so many chiefs in the various villages, communities and towns whose ancestors, as a fact, were not royals before, but servants or slaves. But then by dint of hard work, marriage or the shift, descendants all over are chiefs. And partly because of that, it becomes a taboo to refer to anybody as a slave. Yeah. Three basic ways one could become a servant or a slave before the foreigners came. One, you talk of prisoners of wars. Two, those convicted for some offenses. And three, those who were given out as pawns for debts. Meaning that what? If you go and borrow, the time was due for you to pay. You don't have whatever it is to pay. Let somebody go and serve. And the period under which the person serves, he or she will be seen to be a servant or a slave. And this was already in the setup before the foreigners came. I try also to let people know that much as we would agree that the Portuguese were here first in 1471, is not in any way to suggest it was the first time they started taking Africans from West Africa. No, they were taking Africans long before they got here. The first time is said to be 1440-41. Some say they had 10, others say they had 12, from a place that later on became known as Rio de Oro. Rio de Oro simply means river of gold, and this place should be somewhere up Senegal, thereabout. And to them, they had only one reason for taking the 10 or the 12, to serve as a proof that they finally gotten in touch with Africans. When they got to Portugal, the prince saw them and was happy for two reasons. One, some were to be educated to serve as interpreters for the Portuguese when they came to West Africa. And two, as they put it, the most intelligent ones to be trained to become missionaries to hasten the spread of Christianity here. But sadly, when they got settled, they never came back as planned. They rather ended up in the palaces as slaves. And from that time, no other European came here and went back without African captives. Meaning they started taking Africans 30 years before they first got to Elmina. And 41 years later, the castle was built. And that's the reason most people believe the Portuguese never built the castle only for gold and ivory and others, but also for human trade. Because long before it was built, they were taking Africans across. But they will tell you that those who were taken to Portugal were not treated the same way as Africans were being treated over here before they came. And as they put it, almost the same. And then the religious ones would also suggest that by taking the Africans, they're making Christians out of us. Then they were doing us a favor, because by that, they save our souls and heaven comes in. And all that.
That's a lie.
Okay. Let's be honest.
Consolation, not long down.
So those who want to, they also want to say you can sit.
Okay, we can sit.
Yeah, you can sit. Yes.
We can sit.
You have many things to say.
Ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá ti jókòó tí bá ti yà yín. Ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá jókòó tí bá ti yà yín, ẹ mọ iye owó yín o. Ẹni bá ti jókòó, ẹ mọ iye owó yín o. Ẹni tí ò bá jókòó. Ọ̀gá ṣe gbọ́ tí mò ń sọ fún ẹ báwo. Ẹni bá ti jókòó, ẹ mọ iye owó yín o. Ẹni tí ò bá jókòó kò sí problem.
Kọ́lá photo dà.
As many as you want.
Oh, fún wọn.
Okay. My name is Ato.
What's your name?
Ato.
Ato.
Yes. Ato is A-T-O.
Are you from Ashanti?
No, I'm from Emmanuel. Okay.
My sister.
Okay.
Everybody. I told all of us.